An arranged marriage. To a man in a coma. Yeah, that's how my story starts. Not exactly the fairy tale romance I'd envisioned for myself, but then again, my life has never been much of a fairy tale. My name is Yuki, and I'm about to become Mrs. Fumito Hisoka, whether I like it or not. It all started with my grandfather, bless his meddling heart. Turns out, he made a deal with the Hisoka family back in the day, a promise sealed with a handshake and a bottle of sake that his granddaughter would marry their heir. Fast forward a few decades, and here I am, the sacrificial lamb on the altar of tradition. My parents, of course, were horrified. An arranged marriage? In this day and age? Absolutely not, my mother had declared, her voice dripping with indignation. But their protests were half-hearted, their eyes flickering with a strange mix of relief and something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. As for me, well, I was intrigued. Fumito Hisoka. The name conjured up images of a handsome, enigmatic stranger, a man shrouded in mystery and intrigue. A man who, according to the hushed whispers of the family grapevine, was lying in a hospital bed, his fate hanging in the balance. Not exactly Prince Charming, but then again, Prince Charming had never shown much interest in me anyway. My thoughts drifted to Sato, my childhood sweetheart, the boy next door who had become my first love. Or so I thought. His recent behavior had been confusing, to say the least. Distant, preoccupied, his eyes always searching for someone else. Someone with long, flowing hair and a sweet, innocent smile. Someone named May. May, my adoptive sister, the girl who had waltzed into our lives 5 years ago, a whirlwind of charm and vulnerability, and proceeded to turn our world upside down. She was the sun, and I was the moon, forever orbiting in her shadow, my light dimmed by her radiance. And now, here I was, presented with an escape route, a chance to start over, to create a new life for myself, far away from the tangled web of betrayal and heartbreak that had become my reality. An arranged marriage to a comatose man? It might not be conventional, but it was a chance. And I, desperate for a change, was willing to take it. The arrival of May, my adoptive sister, was supposed to be a joyous occasion. A fragile, delicate flower suffering from a chronic illness, she was brought into our home with the promise of love and healing. My parents, ever the philanthropists, were overjoyed. But the warmth in their eyes, the genuine affection they showered upon her, was a stark contrast to the subtle coldness that had begun to creep into their interactions with me. At first, it was subtle. A forgotten birthday, a misplaced compliment, a gentle sigh when I expressed my enthusiasm for something. Then, the incidents escalated. Accidents, of course, a misplaced hand that knocked over a vase of flowers, a tumbled glass of juice staining my favorite dress. Each time, May would express her concern, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "Oh, Yuki, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to," she would wail, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. And my parents, blinded by their sympathy for the ailing child, would rush to comfort her, their anger directed at me for my clumsiness. It was insidious, this slow, insidious erosion of my place within the family. I, the once beloved daughter, was slowly being pushed to the periphery, replaced by this fragile, captivating creature who seemed to effortlessly steal everyone's attention. One particularly vivid memory, my 16th birthday. I had been anticipating it for weeks, dreaming of a lavish celebration. Instead, it was a subdued affair, overshadowed by May's fragile health. "We don't want to overexcite her," my mother had explained, her voice laced with guilt. The pièce de résistance, a stunning diamond necklace, was presented to May, a get-well-soon gift from my parents. "It's so beautiful," May gushed, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you, Mommy, Daddy." My parents smiled, beaming with pride. My own birthday gift, a simple silver locket, felt like a cruel afterthought. "Oh, and Yuki," my father added, his voice a little awkward, "here's something for you." He handed me a small velvet box. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, lay a single wilted rose. "It's beautiful," I managed to stammer, my voice trembling. May, ever the gracious guest, feigned concern. "Oh, Yuki, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to overshadow your birthday." Here, have this, she said, offering me her diamond necklace. I don't need it anyway. My parents exchanged a worried glance. No, May, my mother said gently. It's for you. Keep it. May's smile widened, a triumphant glint in her eyes. Oh, but I insist, she insisted, her voice dripping with feigned generosity. After all, she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, we wouldn't want anyone to feel left out, now would we, Yuki? The sting of her words, the icy coldness in her eyes, sent a shiver down my spine. I knew then, with a chilling certainty, that May was not the fragile, innocent creature she pretended to be. She was a predator, and I her unsuspecting prey. The neglect was a slow drip, a constant erosion of my sense of self-worth. My parents, once so attentive, now seemed preoccupied, their focus solely on May's fragile health and her ever-changing whims. My brother, Kaido, once my partner in crime, now treated me with a distant politeness that bordered on indifference. Even Sato, my childhood sweetheart, seemed more concerned with May's happiness than my own. Yuki, you're being too sensitive, my mother would chide whenever I dared to express my frustration. May needs our support. She's not well. But what about me? I'd protest, my voice cracking with suppressed emotion. Don't I matter too? Of course you do, darling, she'd reply, her voice laced with a weary impatience. But you're strong. You can handle this. Strong. It was a word I'd come to despise. Strong enough to endure the constant neglect, the dismissive comments, the blatant favoritism towards May. Strong enough to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of a girl who seemed determined to make my life a living hell. The incident with the haute couture dress was a turning point. A prestigious fashion house had sent 2 dresses, one for each of us. May's was a masterpiece, a shimmering cascade of silk and diamonds, fit for a princess. Mine was an afterthought. A simple, outdated design devoid of any embellishment. The message was clear. May was the star, the chosen one, the one who deserved all the attention and adoration. I was just there. Mom, Dad, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. Why is May's dress so much more? My parents exchanged a nervous glance. Well, darling, my mother began, her voice hesitant. May is special. She needs a little extra. Special? I interrupted, my voice rising. So I'm not special. I'm not worthy of a beautiful dress. I'm just ordinary? Yuki, don't be dramatic, my father chided, his voice laced with annoyance. It's just a dress. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything, I cried, tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. It means that I'm not good enough, that I'll never be good enough, that I'll always be second best to May. My outburst was met with silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that spoke volumes. I turned and ran to my room, the tears finally spilling down my cheeks. As I slammed the door shut, I felt a profound sense of isolation, a chilling realization that I was alone in this battle. My family, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, had chosen sides. And I, the unwanted daughter, the inconvenient truth, was left to fend for myself. My 18th birthday. Another subdued affair, overshadowed by May's latest health scare. But this time, something snapped. The cake, a bland vanilla confection. May couldn't handle chocolate out, apparently. The lackluster decorations, the forced smiles, it was all a cruel parody of a celebration. And then, the necklace. Sato's gift, a delicate silver chain with a heart-shaped pendant, vanished. And guess who was the prime suspect? Yuki, where is it? My mother demanded, her voice sharp with accusation. I don't know, I replied, my voice trembling with indignation. I haven't touched it. Don't lie to me, Yuki, she snapped. We all know you're jealous of May. You'd do anything to ruin her happiness. That's not true, I protested, tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. But my protests were drowned out by May's soft sobs. It's okay, Yuki, she whimpered, clutching her chest dramatically. I understand. You've always resented me, but please, just give it back. It's a special gift from Sato. Sato. He stood there, his face etched with a mixture of confusion and disappointment. Yuki, is this true? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. No, I cried, my voice cracking. I didn't take it. May is lying. But my words were met with skepticism. They all believed her, the fragile, innocent May, over me, the jealous, resentful sister. I felt a surge of despair, a chilling realization that I was trapped in a web of lies with no escape in sight. Later that night, as I walked home from the disastrous party, a car swerved onto the sidewalk, its headlights blinding me. I screamed, my body frozen in fear. The impact sent me flying, my world exploding in a kaleidoscope of pain and darkness. I woke up in the hospital, my body a mass of aches and bruises. My parents hovered over me, their faces etched with concern, but their words, their apologies felt hollow, meaningless. They had chosen May, and they would continue to choose her, no matter the cost. May is so sorry, Yuki, my mother said, her voice trembling. She didn't mean for this to happen. It was an accident, my father added, his voice firm. These things happen. An accident. Right. Just like all the other accidents that had plagued me since May's arrival. I closed my eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down my cheek. This was it. The breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to escape this toxic environment, this family that had become a prison of lies and betrayal. As I lay there, my body mending, my spirit shattered, a plan began to form in my mind. A desperate, daring plan that would change my life forever. The flames danced in the darkness, consuming the remnants of my past. Photographs, trophies, birthday cards, gifts from Kaido and Sato, all turned to ash, their memories fading into smoke. It was a cathartic act, a symbolic severing of ties, a final farewell to the life I once knew. A pang of sadness pierced through my resolve. These were the tokens of a childhood filled with laughter and love, a time when I was the center of my parents' world, the apple of my brother's eye, the object of Sato's affection. But that life was gone, replaced by a twisted reality where I was the outsider, the unwanted, the forgotten. I watched the flames lick at a photograph of May, her smile wide and innocent, her eyes sparkling with mischief. A wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. She had stolen everything from me, my family, my friends, my sense of belonging, and I had let her. I had been too kind, too trusting, too willing to sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of hers. No more. I was done being the victim, the pawn in her twisted game. It was time to take control, to forge my own path, to create a future where I was the protagonist, not the supporting character. I picked up a pen and began to write, the words flowing onto the page with a newfound clarity. It was a letter to my family, a final declaration of independence, a goodbye that held no room for reconciliation. Dear Mom, Dad, Kaido, I wrote, my hand trembling slightly, I'm leaving. I'm going to Tokyo to fulfill the agreement that you so desperately tried to avoid. I'm done being your scapegoat, your afterthought, the invisible daughter you never wanted. I'm done with May's lies, with Sato's betrayal, with your indifference. I'm done with this life. I don't expect you to understand, nor do I care. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, nor am I offering mine. This is goodbye. Not just to you, but to the girl I used to be. The girl who believed in family, in love, and happily ever after. That girl is gone, consumed by the flames of your neglect and May's cruelty. I'm starting a new chapter. A chapter where I write my own story, where I choose my own destiny. And I don't need any of you to be a part of it. Goodbye, Yuki. I folded the letter, tucked it into an envelope, and addressed it to my family. Then, I walked out of the house, leaving behind the ashes of my past and the ghosts of my former life. As I stepped into the unknown, a strange sense of peace washed over me. It was the peace of closure, the peace of acceptance, the peace of finally letting go. Tokyo, a whirlwind of neon lights, bustling crowds, and a language I barely understood. It was a world away from the manicured lawns and sprawling mansions of Kyoto. Yet, as I stepped out of the airport, a strange sense of calm washed over me. This was my fresh start, my escape from the suffocating cage of my former life. A sleek black car, a far cry from the ostentatious sports cars favored by my family, whisked me away to the Hisoka estate. It wasn't the imposing fortress I'd imagined, but a sprawling traditional house nestled amidst a serene garden. Cherry blossoms, delicate and fragrant, framed the entrance, their pink petals fluttering in the breeze like a welcoming wave. Hanoka Hisoka, Fumito's grandmother, greeted me at the door. Her smile was warm, her eyes crinkling at the corners with genuine affection. "Yuki, welcome home," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for a woman of her age. "We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival." Home. The word resonated deep within me, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile atmosphere of my family's mansion. I was ushered into a spacious room, decorated in soothing tones of green and beige, sunlight streaming through the other paper screens. It was a far cry from the opulent yet impersonal room I'd occupied back in Kyoto. "This is your room," Hanoka explained, her eyes twinkling. "Make yourself comfortable. If you need anything, just ask." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. This, this was kindness. Genuine, heartfelt kindness. The kind I hadn't experienced in years. The rest of the Hisoka family was equally welcoming. Ishida, Fumito's father, a quiet, reserved man, greeted me with a gentle smile. Mira, his mother, a whirlwind of energy and warmth, enveloped me in a hug that felt like a mother's embrace. Even Sakura, Fumito's little cousin, a mischievous girl with bright, curious eyes, treated me with a warmth that brought tears to my eyes. "Welcome to the family, Yuki," Mira said, her voice filled with affection. "We're so glad you're here." "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. It's it's wonderful to be here." As I sat with them, sipping tea and sharing stories, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I craved. They listened to my hesitant tales of my past, their eyes filled with understanding and compassion. No judgment, no accusations, just acceptance. "You're safe now, Yuki," Hanoka said, her hand resting gently on mine. "This is your home. We'll take care of you." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul, a promise of a future free from the pain and betrayal of my past. And as I looked around the room, at the smiling faces of my new family, I felt a surge of hope, a flicker of warmth that had long been extinguished. Maybe, just maybe, this arranged marriage wasn't such a bad idea after all. The days leading up to the supposed meeting with my comatose fiancé were a blur of nervous anticipation. I imagined a sterile hospital room, a figure lying motionless beneath crisp white sheets, a somber atmosphere thick with unspoken grief. Not exactly the ideal setting for a budding romance, but the reality was different. I was led not to a hospital room, but to a sunny, spacious room overlooking a meticulously manicured garden. And there he was, Fumito Hisoka, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, sunlight illuminating his handsome features, awake, alert, and undeniably attractive. "Yuki," he greeted me, his voice a warm baritone that sent a shiver down my spine. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." You, you're awake," I stammered, my cheeks flushing with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. He chuckled, a low, melodious sound that eased the tension in the room. "Indeed I am, though I must confess I've been privy to your presence for quite some time now." My eyes widened in alarm. "You have? But how?" "Let's just say I have a very capable grandmother," he replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "She's been keeping me informed of your every move." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Oh," I mumbled, mortified. "That's embarrassing." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Not at all. I find it rather endearing. It seems we both have a lot to learn about each other." And so began our unconventional courtship. We spent hours talking, sharing stories, laughing at each other's jokes. He was intelligent, witty, and surprisingly insightful. He listened to my tales of woe with a patience and understanding that I had never experienced before. And as the days turned into weeks, I found myself drawn to him, not just out of gratitude or obligation, but out of a genuine affection that surprised and delighted me. "You know," he said one day, his voice soft, "I wasn't always this incapacitated." I looked at him, my heart aching with sympathy. "I know," I whispered. "Hanoka told me about the accident." He nodded, his gaze drifting towards the window. It was a difficult time, but I'm getting better, slowly but surely. I'm glad, I said, reaching out to take his hand. He squeezed it gently, his eyes meeting mine with a warmth that sent a shiver down my spine. I'm glad you're here, Yuki, he said, his voice husky with emotion. Even if it started with a rather unusual agreement, I'm grateful for this second chance. I smiled, my heart swelling with a newfound hope. Me too, Fumito, I whispered, my fingers tightening around his. Me too. Fumito's gaze lingered on the faint scars that crisscrossed my arms, a legacy of Maya's accidents and my family's indifference. Yuki, he said one evening, his voice laced with concern, those injuries, they don't seem accidental. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. The truth was a tangled web of deceit and betrayal, a story I wasn't sure I was ready to share. But Fumito's eyes, those deep, perceptive eyes that seemed to see right through me, encouraged me to confide in him. They're not, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. And so, I told him everything. The arrival of May, the gradual shift in my family's affections, the subtle manipulations, the blatant lies, the car accident that had almost ended my life. I spoke of my own sacrifices, my kidney donation, my willingness to give up everything for a family that never truly appreciated me. Fumito listened patiently, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. When I finished, he reached out and took my hand, his touch gentle but firm. Yuki, he said, his voice filled with compassion. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve any of that. I know, I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. But it's over now. I'm here with you. And that's all that matters. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. Yes, you are. And I promise you, Yuki, I'll never let anyone hurt you again. His words were a balm to my wounded soul, a promise of safety and protection I had long yearned for. In that moment, I knew that I could trust him, that I could rely on him, that I could finally let down my guard and be myself. Fumito, I said, my voice thick with emotion, thank you for everything. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. There's no need for thanks, Yuki. I'm just doing what any decent human being would do. He paused, his expression turning serious. I've been doing some digging, he said, his voice low. About your family, about the arrangement. My heart skipped a beat. What did you find? He took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. It seems your grandfather's deal wasn't exactly straightforward. There was a complication. A bride-swapping scheme, if you will. My eyes widened in shock. What? But why? It seems your family wasn't keen on marrying their precious daughter to a comatose man, he explained, his voice laced with disdain. They intended to substitute May in your place. A wave of anger washed over me, hot and consuming. They had planned to use May, their adopted daughter, as a pawn in their twisted game, sacrificing her happiness for their own selfish desires. And I, their own flesh and blood, had been deemed expendable. I can't believe them, I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. They were willing to... I know, Yuki, Fumito said, his voice soothing. But it doesn't matter now. You're here with me. And they can't hurt you anymore. He pulled me into his arms, his embrace warm and comforting. As I buried my face in his chest, I felt a surge of gratitude, a deep appreciation for the man who had seen through my family's lies and offered me a safe haven. In his arms, I felt protected, cherished, loved. And in that moment, I knew that I had finally found my true home. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Fittings for the elaborate kimono, calligraphy lessons for the thank you notes, endless consultations with the wedding planner. It was all a bit overwhelming, but in a good way. A stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of my former life. Fumito, ever the patient gentleman, guided me through the intricacies of Japanese wedding traditions, his hand always there to steady me when I stumbled. Our connection deepened with each passing day, a delicate dance of shared laughter, whispered secrets, and stolen glances that sent shivers down my spine. I was falling in love with him deeply and irrevocably. But the shadows of the past lingered, casting a pall over my newfound happiness. Sato. He had found me, tracked me down to this foreign land, his voice filled with regret and longing when he called. Yuki, he pleaded, come back. I made a mistake. May, she's not you. I never should have. His words tugged at my heartstrings, reawakening a dormant affection I thought I had buried. Sato, my first love, my childhood confidant, the boy who had held my hand and promised me forever. But that was a lifetime ago, a different world, a different me. Sato, I said, my voice trembling. It's too late. I'm getting married to Fumito. No, he insisted, his voice cracking with desperation. Don't do this. Come back to me. We can make things right. Things can never be right, Sato, I replied, my voice firming with newfound resolve. You made your choice. You chose May, and now I'm choosing Fumito. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that stretched across the miles. And then, a choked sob. I understand, he whispered, his voice broken. But please, Yuki, know this. I never stopped loving you. I never will. His words echoed in my heart long after we hung up, a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. But as I looked at Fumito, his eyes filled with a love so pure, so unwavering, I knew that I had made the right choice. Sato was the past, a ghost of a love that had withered and died under the weight of betrayal. Fumito was the present, the future, the man who had offered me a safe haven, a new beginning, a chance at a happiness I had never dared to dream of. And as I prepared to walk down the aisle, my hand trembling in Fumito's, I knew that I was leaving the shadows of the past behind, stepping into the light of a future filled with love, acceptance, and the promise of forever. The wedding ceremony was a symphony of tradition and elegance. Incense filled the air, its fragrance mingling with the scent of cherry blossoms. I stood in the Hisoka family shrine, adorned in a magnificent silk kimono, its intricate embroidery shimmering under the soft light. Fumito, handsome and regal in his traditional attire, waited for me at the altar, his eyes filled with a love that made my heart soar. And then they arrived. My family. Uninvited, unwelcome, their faces etched with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Sato trailed behind them, his expression a mask of desperation. The serenity of the shrine shattered, replaced by a tense, suffocating silence. Yuki, my mother hissed, her voice laced with venom. What is the meaning of this? It's my wedding, mother, I replied calmly, my voice surprisingly steady. To Fumito. But the agreement, she sputtered, her eyes wide with confusion. The agreement was for me to marry Fumito, I stated, my voice firm, not May. A collective gasp arose from my family. Sato stared at me, his face pale with shock. May, clinging to Kaito's arm, looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting nervously. You knew? Kaito exclaimed, his voice filled with disbelief. Of course I knew, I retorted, my voice laced with a hint of triumph. Fumito and I have been aware of your deceitful little scheme for quite some time now. My parents' faces paled. They opened their mouths to speak, but before they could utter a word, Hanoka Hisoka stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. Enough, she declared, her voice ringing with authority. We, the Hisoka family, will not tolerate such deception. You attempted to pass off your adopted daughter as your own, to sacrifice her happiness for your own selfish gain. Such behavior is despicable. Ishida Hisoka, Fumito's father, stood beside her, his expression grim. We have no further business with your family, he stated coldly. Consider all ties severed. My parents' faces contorted with rage. You can't do this, my father roared. You are nothing to us anymore, Hanoka interrupted, her voice laced with steel. Leave, now. They stood there for a moment, their faces a mixture of fury and humiliation. Then, with a final venomous glare in my direction, they turned and stormed out of the shrine, Sato trailing behind them like a whipped puppy. As the doors closed behind them, a wave of relief washed over me. The truth was out, the deception exposed, the ties severed. I was free. Yuki, Fumito said, his voice soft. Are you all right? I nodded, my eyes shining with unshed tears. Yes, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I am. Thank you. He smiled, his eyes filled with a love that banished the last vestiges of doubt and fear. You're welcome, my love, he said, taking my hand in his. Now, let's get married. And as we stood before the altar, exchanging vows that were both traditional and deeply personal, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of belonging, a sense of finally coming home. The shadows of the past had faded, replaced by the bright light of a future filled with love, acceptance, and the promise of forever. Life with Fumito was peaceful, a stark contrast to the constant drama and turmoil that had defined my life in Kyoto. We settled into a comfortable routine, exploring the bustling streets of Tokyo, discovering hidden gems in quiet neighborhoods, and sharing quiet evenings in our cozy home. Fumito, ever the attentive husband, showered me with affection and support, his love a constant source of strength and comfort. The news from Kyoto was a distant echo, a reminder of the life I had left behind. May, it seemed, had finally overplayed her hand. Her manipulative tactics, once so effective, had unraveled, revealing her true nature to the world. The details were murky, a whirlwind of legal jargon and tabloid headlines. But the outcome was clear. May was facing charges, her future uncertain. My parents, their reputation tarnished by the scandal, retreated from public life, their once thriving business empire crumbling under the weight of their neglect. Kaito, disillusioned and heartbroken, distanced himself from the family, his dreams of a carefree future shattered by May's deceit. Even Sato, the boy who had once held my heart, disappeared from the social scene, his whereabouts unknown. A wave of sadness washed over me as I read the news reports. These were the people who had raised me, nurtured me, shaped me into the person I was today. And yet they had betrayed me, abandoned me, cast me aside like a broken toy. A part of me, a small, stubborn part, still clung to the hope of reconciliation, of forgiveness, of a return to the idyllic family life I had once cherished. But that hope was fading, replaced by a growing sense of acceptance. The family I had lost was not the family I had dreamed of. They were flawed, selfish, blinded by their own desires. The Hisokas, on the other hand, had welcomed me with open arms, offering me a love that was unconditional, a support that was unwavering. They were my true family now, the people who had seen me at my worst and loved me anyway. And as I looked at Fumito, his eyes filled with a warmth that melted away the last vestiges of sadness, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had escaped the toxic web of my past, found solace in the arms of a man who cherished me, and built a new life filled with love, acceptance, and the promise of a brighter future. The justice served might not have been the kind I had envisioned, but it was justice nonetheless. And it had paved the way for my rebirth. My transformation from a victim of circumstance to a woman in control of her own destiny. The gentle patter of rain on the window pane lulled me into a state of tranquil contentment. 5 years. 5 years since I'd stepped off that plane in Tokyo, a scared, heartbroken girl with nothing but a suitcase and a desperate hope for a new beginning. 5 years since I'd married Fumito, the man who had become my rock, my confidant, my partner in this crazy journey called life. Our home, nestled in a quiet suburb of Tokyo, was filled with warmth and laughter. Photographs adorned the walls, capturing precious moments. Our wedding day, family gatherings, vacations to exotic locales. A testament to the life we had built together, a life free from the shadows of the past, a life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of our chosen family. Fumito, his once frail frame, now strong and healthy, sat beside me, his hand resting gently on mine. His eyes, those deep pools of warmth and understanding, met mine, a silent conversation passing between us. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" I said, my voice soft with contentment. He smiled, his fingers tightening around mine. "We have, my love? Further than either of us could have imagined." "Do you ever regret it?" I asked, the question lingering in the air. "Marrying me, I mean. A stranger from a different world with a messy past and a broken family." He chuckled, a low rumbling sound that filled me with warmth. Regret it? Never. You, my dear Yuki, are the best thing that ever happened to me. You brought light into my life, chased away the shadows, and showed me the true meaning of love. Tears pricked my eyes, a testament to the depth of my love for this extraordinary man. He had healed my wounds, mended my broken heart, and given me a family that cherished me for who I was, flaws and all. Thank you, Fumito, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. For everything. He leaned in, his lips brushing against my forehead in a tender kiss. Thank you, Yuki, he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. For choosing me, for loving me, for being you. We sat in comfortable silence, the rain outside a soothing symphony. The past was a distant memory, a faded scar that no longer held power over me. I had found my happiness, my peace, my home. And as I looked at Fumito, his hand intertwined with mine, I knew that this was just the beginning of our forever.